Today we have a very special guest, Dana Beal, and I don't need to introduce him because everybody who is doing last 20 years any kind of legalization works will know his name because probably you have taken part in one of the global millennium marches, and he is the inventor. So, Dana, very much welcome. Where are you sitting in this moment?
I'm sitting near Chicago.
Near Chicago.
Well, there was weather and then, various delays. I'm trying to go home for Christmas.
Yeah, Chicago is known in Europe like being the most Polish city of US, isn't it?
But I'm outside Chicago. I'm
Okay.
not even in Chicago. You wouldn't know where I am. It's just a town that means nothing to anyone. Okay.
Okay.
So,
But,
I just give you an idea of where I am. I'm near Lake Michigan. I'm near the southern tip of Lake Michigan, outside of Chicago. But that is not important. I
Okay.
want to waste our hour. I want to get into the questions that you want to ask me. I am Dana Beal, and I'm known as being the guy originally who started the Smoke-Ins in 1967. And I'm in a movie called Smoke-In with Ed Rosenthal that Howard Lotsoff made. And Howard Lotsoff very nicely made a half-hour movie for us called Smoke-In, which, if you go in YouTube and put in Howard Lotsoff film Smoke-In, you can watch us at the White House in 1977 on the 4th of July. We had about 10,000 people. We had 500 people who turned themselves in. And as always, when we tried to turn ourselves in an organized fashion, they refused to take us. They only prey on people in the middle of the night. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is Howard then, we owed him a favor, so we worked on his project, which was a useful thing. We discovered a drug from the African rainforest that gets rid of heroin overnight. And we were having some problems with junkies stealing the marijuana from us. They're fronting out pounds of pot. And sometimes they wouldn't get paid for it. Well, we have a way of dealing with that. And let me tell you, if you've ever taken Ibogaine, you never want to take it again. But you will take it again if you get started on heroin. Let me tell you, you have no choice. So it's not the most fun drug to take, like an LSD, which is a great sex trip, or psilocybin, which is kind of a fantasy. I don't know how to characterize psilocybin. I did some in Vienna in 2017 for the Ibogaine forum we had there. But Ibogaine is kind of like, have you ever overdosed on a dab where you take too much cannabis at once?
well, me myself,
You can't move, right? And if you try to move and you get up and walk around, you vomit. Overdosing, the main problem with overdosing with cannabis is ataxia, which is you can't move, and vomiting. And that's no fun. So titrate, folks. Be sure you don't smoke too much. And, watch out for those dabs and vapes, because you can overdose on dabs and vapes. Anyway, Ibogaine is like that, except for 36 hours. So nobody wanted to do it. Well, and not really. It's actually only about 8 hours where you can't move.
let's say like this.
But the point is,
Yeah.
it wasn't really popular as a psychedelic drug. You understand?
Yes, of
And we
course.
discovered
Why I should
give
take
it to somebody in the morning when they're going into heroin withdrawal. They're really in distress, right? 30 minutes later, their heroin withdrawal goes away and never comes back.
I still, let's say like this, I still don't get the conclusion from my side why you exactly picked Ibogaine as one of your main topics of campaigning.
Because we had a problem. See, right now in Oregon, they passed a decrim bill.
Yes.
In the decrim bill, it's an initiative, a voter initiative. There's a provision to take all the money that built up in this treatment fund that is derived from cannabis taxes and spend it on Suboxone. Suboxone is an opiate replacement therapy, which is 200 times more difficult to quit than heroin, which is state-sponsored like methadone, right? Mm-hmm. So you become a client, an award of the state. And if you try to escape, you go into hideous withdrawal. We have this magic potion we can give you for that.
Okay, so let's say Oregon has just made a new law, and you are one of the person who's following all the laws. Would you say Oregon is has the best solution in this moment? Is the
no. The best solution, of course, is to amend the other law that they passed, which was the clinics for psilocybin to add Ibogaine, which we're trying to do. I'm working with Paul Stanford.
Yeah.
And you may know him in Portland. And we're working in New York State, and now with John Entwistle, who is Dennis Peron's husband. You know, Dennis Peron was the guy who passed Proposition 215 to legalize medical marijuana, changed the world in 1996. And John is friends with Scott Weiner, who's the state senator that wants to pass a bill to legalize psychedelics in Sacramento. And we have in Albany, New York, another bill to create a state-sponsored institute to look at all psychedelic drugs for treatment of addiction and serious mental illness. Because it turns out LSD is quite good for alcoholism, and 5-MeO-DMT is good for methamphetamine dependency, and Ibogaine, of course, is a broad-spectrum anti-addictive, but it's also a cure for Parkinson's disease. And I somehow have to get some Ibogaine to somebody who's going to die of Parkinson's disease if I don't do something. So there's these moral. It's like when we discovered that marijuana stopped AIDS wasting, right? It's from Shaughnessy, right?
Maybe a question.
Marijuana is an
from who?
Anti-inflammatory, sovereign anti-inflammatory. But marijuana brownies, if we just known in 1982, we would have given everybody marijuana brownies and kept them alive. Of course, they would have.
We are next to Amsterdam, you know. The brownies are very illegal because they are hard drugs, and I know why. But let's say they are more common than might be in some United States. However, I have a small question, because exactly this point of treating HIV with marijuana. Do you know who was the first doctor?
Well, see, I'm an ACT UP. I'm from the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. We were the ones that brought the AIDS drugs to the world 50 years early by continuous protests and demonstrations. Until
Yes.
1996, they came up with protease inhibitors.
Can
Prior
you
to
can
that
you repeat the
time, we had
names of the players
THC,
a little bit?
and we had marijuana. That's all we had was cannabis. All we had.
Yes, exactly, because this was one of the first messages I have heard ever about cannabis, that it might help with AIDS, and
Well,
um,
you get a Crohn's-like syndrome with inflammation in the gut that means you have no appetite at all.
yes, exactly.
Cannabis quells the inflammation. It's a direct anti-glutamate effect. If you look on the M5, M1 and M5 glutamate receptor, on the side of the receptor is actually on the side of the terminal is a receptor for signaling back, saying you're making too much glutamate. Glutamate is what makes things, burn when you have inflammation. So what you need to do is you need something to like quell the burn, and that's the endocannabinoids. I could show you a wonderful slide, but I don't have my slides.
Well, at this moment, because you are really very, very, very long in the game, and let's ask another, like, let's say, social question. Would would you straight connect the cannabis and the hemp movement to the hippies, or is it another movement?
Would they connect them to what?
To hippies, to
Hippies.
the man with long hair and flower generation.
Oh, that.
Our,
Yeah,
our,
I was in that.
is
can
is
show you
this
the video.
connected, or is it another movement in
I had
another?
500 hippies carrying me around on their shoulder.
Yes.
Yeah, I was busted for 9 hits of acid, but we were doing smoke-ins at the park. So I was the leader of the smoke-ins, and they came and arrested me. They did a sting operation and got somebody to give them my personal acid, which I never should have given out. And he was a fucking armed robber who was working off a sentence for armed robbery by snitching out everybody he could
Fuck.
for drugs, which is, of course, completely peaceful, So let's have the violent people prey on the non-violent people.
So, but
That was the
you
government
didn't
idea.
give up
What?
instead of giving up, you multiplied the events. Now coming back to global marijuana march, what was the original name of
Well, you see,
global
there's
marijuana?
this guy. We got into a big argument at High Times.
Yes,
Steve Hager. You know the cannabis cup guy, Steve Hager, from High Times? Well, we said that Rudolph Giuliani, which, by the way, rhymes with Adolf Mussolini, was a fascist. We said he's not truly a Nazi, but he is a fascist. He's kind of an Italian. He's kind of a garden variety fascist. And he's banned the pot parade in New York City, which we have done for 26 years. So we said we will start a global event on the internet, because what they're trying to say is that this is just about smoking pot, that we have no political demands or consciousness beyond pleasure. And this is typical Rudy Giuliani bullshit, as you see in the current election. He is a fascist. And Donald Trump, if you see, I can produce a picture that shows the visage of Mussolini and the visage of Donald Trump, and they are identical.
well, how to say?
So I was not wrong.
You know
And
about
we defeated
America. We are
We
Europeans.
defeated them. We defeated them by going into 300 cities worldwide. 300 cities worldwide. And everywhere we went, we brought the word, where the United States government knows about a cure for drugs that could abolish drug prohibition overnight. We could replace prisons with doctors. They're just withholding it from the world because of a bad attitude. They have a bad attitude, man.
So let's stay with the elections. Now let's suppose all will take place like explained. There will be a new president and new vice president, and also what is very 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 important from our side of view, your Congress have voted for more marijuana in the end. Will anything really change, or is it just
Well, see, this is the
let's say
problem.
game?
I got to tell you that in that law that they passed, there was a provision: no one can get a license who was once arrested for marijuana. And this is unacceptable. Maybe it'll come out later. But I was just denied a bank account to make Ibogaine. See, we're trying to manufacture clinical trial grade Ibogaine in India. And to do that, we need a bank account. Because people like the Beckley Foundation will send me money if I have a bank account. But because I'm on a marijuana blacklist and I went to prison for medical marijuana, which of course they said was not, because if it was medical, they couldn't get away with this, but they had to lie. And as you may know the story, I ended up dying on the jailhouse floor as I was being transferred to prison. It was the most effective protest I ever did. I stopped them from taking me to prison. They had to put me outside in a hospital with a guard. But soon they came and said, "This is too expensive. Sign this piece of paper, and we will grant you appeal bail."
May I ask you how long you have been in total in custody? Let's call it like this.
Anyway, I'm on a list. I think I'm on a list. They still think I'm Al Capone, man.
Well, so let's ask like this: when the legalization is coming now, and you could maybe make some fortune out of your activism. You are just out of the game. Is it
No,
like this?
I have an Ibogaine company.
Yes.
But you see, the problem is I took over Howard Lotsoff's company, but in the meantime, I also went to prison. I lost a lot of time. I've lost some time because of other reasons. And now other people have started companies that are spurious. They don't know what they're doing. We actually have a plan to bring Ibogaine to the world to fulfill Howard Lotsoff's mission of making certain everybody who needs this can get it. And other people are more or less stealing the limelight. So life is not fair, but I think that we'll get through it.
Let me ask. So physically, how long you have been in this prison or hospital with the guard in total?
Oh, that was in 2011. I was released from the jail, from the succession of jails and prisons and stuff, February 14th, 2014. And since that time, they have arrested me, but they cannot put me back in jail because they know I'm going to bring up the fact that, well, if I'm such a nefarious drug dealer, What am I doing bringing the cure for drug addiction with me?
Well,
And I'm going to ask that to the newspapers. And they're going to say, oh, we don't want to talk about the fact that it's the cure for drug addiction at all. They let me go.
let's say because it's in this moment actual, I will send an offer for a new job. In this moment, it's they need very many people who are taking tests for COVID. And the funny thing is to pull the stick in the nose. You need to have an examine in being a nurse or something similar. And I was laughing on this because in this moment officially there is crisis, but you need to fill out a formula to be allowed to die. I don't know. It's really horror, and I mean, we have been celebrating now that European Commission told it's CBD, it's not a narcotic, but this is something like nothing. This is the most normal thing on this planet, what we are talking about. And still, we are getting also busted for CBD, and this is like, hey, this isn't even the worst to talk about it.
Well, we're actually taking out a patent because we're going to be selling CBD with a little bit of Ibogaine in it for
Okay.
Parkinson's disease. And Ibogaine reverses the paralysis of Parkinson's and mental confusion. And the CBD is good for tremor. So the thing is, a lot of CBD underdoses. You have to give at least 200 milligrams. Most of the stuff you get in the gas station is 30 milligrams or something. It's just not enough to do anything.
So now about the situation in this moment, how do you see the whole movement? What is going on now? All the states will legalize, and each state will have another solution, or
well, like I said, we're trying to get ahead of the psychedelic thing by having a bill. And there is a difference between state-sponsored research and everybody being able to open up a clinic, having a free enterprise capitalism. Principally, it's against the RAVE Act. Joe Biden passed a law, like the federal crack house statute, that makes it illegal to maintain a premises to give a psychedelic drug. That's why we want state-sponsored, because that gets around that. Obviously, if New York State does it, it's legal. And if Peter Thiel, who started Compass Pathways, does it. You know this guy, Christian Angermeyer?
Well, let's say
Heard of him?
It's not that easy. What has to happen to really make, or do you believe the next 4 years cannabis will really become legal US wide, or not that much?
It's in the process right now. Difficult to tell. We're doing some stuff that may affect it around the edges. Cannabis, my position is it would be easier at this point with so many people supporting cannabis, right? something like, what is it? 33% are for medical, 58% are for general use, 8% are against it under any circumstances. Get rid of the 8%. That
I
would
have
be
to ask you more about political things. Um, I know exactly that you want to tell me something about Sarah Glad.
about what?
About Sarah Glad.
Oh yeah. Well, you see, this is part of the trip about Hanf. The Hanf one Hanf is to read. You know, when the subject is hemp by
Yeah.
George Bear, right? Which I transmitted to Jack Herrera through the process of doing a initiative on the ballot in 1985 in Oregon. And he used part of the book that we had prepared, a Cliff Notes version of George's book, as a electioneering tabloid that went on everybody's door in Oregon, you know, saying that hemp is this great source of food, fuel, and fiber that can save the planet because we won't have to cut down trees. We have global warming and we don't want to cut down trees. We want to grow hemp instead. And it actually moved the dial. More people, by finding out that marijuana is not just this, you know, that their mind something equivalent to heroin or LSD, that marijuana is, you know, really the safest therapeutically active substance known to man. So he then took and made it into a book. And George was a little bit upset because, you know, Jack had something called the marijuana white paper, which was a tabloid size thing of like facts about marijuana, right? And he plugged one half of Jack's book into that, right? And that became The Emperor Wears No Clothes. So the thing, the connection to Sarah Glad is that then, you know, we decided to see if we could introduce the Ibogaine information in Germany, and we did a treatment in Leiden in 1994 with Howard Lotsoff and George. I guess George was there in the background. I didn't know whether he was there or not, but I more recently saw a picture of the two together. Howard Lotsoff, the inventor of Ibogaine, and Hans Georg Bear, which I would like to get. Next time I see it, I'll snag it. But they did not understand you really have to supervise these treatments. And these guys flew in from New York. They had jet lag. In the middle of the night while they were sleeping, the female patient who had secreted some heroin on her went in and smoked it in the bathroom. But she recovered and she could walk around. You know, I told you, you can't walk around at first, but she took it in the morning. This is 3 in the morning. It's almost 24 hours later. It was a very bad idea to smoke it. She came out, she laid down, and went into respiratory arrest because Ibogaine potentiates opiates. So it'll multiply the opiate effect, you multiply it, you kill the patient. So there was a huge brouhaha with another person. Dr. Deborah Manish claimed that it might have been the Ibogaine that killed her. And they had a 3-year prosecution of Dr. Jan Bastians, a very famous Dutch psychiatrist who gave LSD to concentration camp survivors in the 70s, who worked with Howard Lotsoff. And they took away his license. And to this day, his son and his grandson is driven crazy by the injustice of that. Because it turned out that the Ibogaine didn't kill the lady, the heroin killed the lady. Okay, German girl. Okay, I got pictures of her in my Ibogaine book. But anyway, since that time, the Dutch government views any Ibogaine as potentially, if there's a death, they're going to try to prosecute based on it was caused by the Ibogaine. But you have to understand that the addict population is 4 times more likely to die than regular people who smoke pot. In other words, if you are going out and shooting heroin that has fentanyl in it, it's Russian roulette. You know, it ain't the fault of like the people who smoke pot. I can tell you that. So anyway, all we were trying to do is help, and they just have a vendetta. And there's a lady that's been doing these treatments. A lot of people come from Sweden, which is very anti-drug, and they come to Sarah Glass's house to be detoxed from heroin. They got no Ibogaine in Sweden, but they have heroin, So anyway, first, some guy came from Germany and got into an argument with Sarah about Israel, because she is Israeli, and he had some differences of opinion about, I guess, the West Bank settlements or some little thing like that, and stormed out of her house about 48 hours after doing the Ibogaine. But it was no longer really under the influence of Ibogaine. Went down to his room or his hotel, went into the bar, got schnockered in the bar, stumbled out, drunk, trying to find a place, trying to go to the central station to buy heroin, we think, because he got hit by a truck. There was no Ibogaine in this guy except trace amounts at this point. They tried to prosecute Sarah for 3 years. They couldn't. So when this other case happened where somebody came and had an asthma attack, and Sarah refused to even treat them, and they went next door to Tom, who also had Ibogaine, they died of an asthma attack. And they held Sarah for 3.5 years, calling her the witch of Schiphol in the press. So literally a witch hunt. And she did nothing wrong, and they're still not going to let her out. Possibly tomorrow is the day. I've been talking to Enrico Fletcher from the European Coalition for Just and Effective Drug Policy. We must make an international cause célèbre out of this case of wrongful imprisonment. Literally, the woman is being imprisoned for 4 more years for doing nothing.
Well, we know some more people being paid for doing nothing. The European community is full of them. However, you have mentioned Jack Harrer, and always when Jack Harrer is mentioned, this is the right time to mention Melissa Balin, who made all this here happening, who is overtaking the dating, and she's, let's say, the famous movie maker from Hollywood, and so she is doing the dating and the connections for us in the US. And thanks her on this at this moment, and we recommend also her.
It's a pretty good little short. I've
Well,
seen it. It's a short.
When we are talking, let's say, about cannabis celebrities, and I would ask you who you would recommend me to make an interview from the US. Who is next? Can you nominate somebody?
Have you ever interviewed Paul Stanford?
Not yet. Not yet.
I think you should ask him about the great financial fraud that was inflicted upon him by these Canadian Sharpies who stole his company.
Okay.
He was a guy who was a mainstay. He's friends with Willie Nelson. and he was keeping up to date the cannabis cards, ID cards, medical cards of more than 200,000 patients. He got paid for that, he's keeping them current.
Yeah, he's very
And they stole his company and almost made him homeless. Of course, he can still grow pot, so he can never be homeless. But they took away all the potential money that we had to do other things. It was stolen by some guys called Kronos Group. They're thieves. They come from Benny Gantz's kibbutz.
Okay.
Where they have, according to my friend Jonathan, a big marijuana extraction factory they have not been able to use because the Netanyahu government won't let them.
Yeah. Well, if you have any recommendation, especially also about women and about, for example, native growers or somebody who took part in the community.
Well, have you interviewed Ed Rosenthal?
Also not yet.
They have some new seeds that will mature a little bit earlier, and people who grow them will be able to sell their pot.
Super. Yeah. When are you planning to make your own pot?
Some people have talked about that. I'm friends with Alan Dronkers. Maybe they'll be inspired as they were with Jack. I'm not that motivated to see it happen, so it's not really happening. I'm really trying to make GMP Ibogaine. I'm not trying to manufacture Volcanja extract. I'm really actively doing that. And I'm actively working on a patent with the U.S. Patent Office for the Parkinson's. Because
It's a little bit like Paul Stanford. I think everybody of us dreams a little bit of having really nice plants. And I have like the dream that everybody of us one day will have something like a wine yard and will make very, very nice grapes and make them accessible for patients and recreational users.
Well,
and they will come from far away to taste the very special taste, even it's not.
I'd like to get my hands on some Afghani black hash.
No? Okay.
I'm supposed to send some Ibogaine to my friend Murtaza, but PayPal screwed up the transaction and made it like purchase instead of friends and family. I don't want to pay the $50. So I got to wait like 26 days for the money to come back. And then I'll try to send friends and family. We're trying to send Ibogaine from South Africa to Kabul. Maybe I can get some hash on the backstroke, though. Who knows? There was something I wanted to tell you that was a principal point.
No, it does. It's exactly those things are very interesting because people which are not that much in this market in this scene are don't know what are the real problems. I mean, we all living or starvating somehow with the formalities and with the forms and with taxes and with regulations which regulates nothing and makes everything senseless. This is one part of the whole game, and it's crazy.
Oh.
I mean, this is the reality on both sides of the big lake.
Well,
yeah, I never, one time, and believe me or not, one time in German history after the Second World War, the whole German Bundestag, the parliament voted with 100% for legalization of medicinal marijuana and that it can be grown in Germany. Now, this was 3 years ago, and still no plants available. Did you ever heard of a country which needs more than 3 years to make the plant fixed? You know, what's the hell going on? And
I
we
don't.
have to import from Canada. Crazy thing, isn't it?
All right. Well,
Yeah, 100% of the parliament made here there are idiots.
all right. Well, look, I wanted to tell you a little story before I got off here about Jack Herrera.
Yes, please.
Jack Herrera was under the influence of a guy named Steve Hager. So he was always very skeptical of the Ibogaine. And, you know, Ibogaine has anti-stroke activity. If you get a stroke, you could take Ibogaine. It'll stop the stroke in mid-stroke, and it will stop a lot of damage. He would never try Ibogaine. And Ibogaine, you know, basically, he got up and gave a speech in Oregon, and then he died of a stroke. It's unfortunate because the guy Steve Hager turns out to have come from the Soho Weekly News. And the Soho Weekly News tried to, I don't know exactly what they were trying to do. They were really trying to promote the idea that the next big thing, you see, at that time, a lot of people were doing coke. It was the late 70s. They said the next big thing is heroin. Everybody's going to be doing heroin. And we said, no. That's, we know from, you know, the early part of the 70s and the 60s that that's just a really bad idea. And instead, they tried to put it in the magazine after Tom Forsad committed suicide because he was never able to overcome the death of his friend in the plane crash. They were trying to bring a major load of pot in Florida. And he had protested with me against the CIA heroin back in the day when the Marijuana March went and demonstrated against Richard Nixon having a two-faced policy, right, where he's trying to ban marijuana with Operation Intercept, all the Mexican marijuana, stop all the Mexican marijuana, come in, create a huge shortage in the market, and then flood it with Vietnamese heroin. So all the hippies would become junkies. And we said, you know, you're not going to bring stuff back. So they ended up like big, there was a bunch of back and forthing and fighting. But they ended up basically saying that Ibogaine is like the Kool-Aid in Jonestown. And Hager was from that group. You know, he was from that group. They tried to put me in prison for 7 years for somebody having a paper cut. And meanwhile, they planted a bomb in front of my house that blinded a bomb squad detective in one eye. And, you know, it was just totally double standard. And they had this article that appeared, Jonestown on Bleecker Street, in their magazine after we protested the heroin chic. And
Well,
they tried to bring that into the case. They tried to bring that into court, right? And say, here, this is what the, you know, because there was a paper cut. But they're trying to give me 7 years for assault, right? So they had to have something. So they said, this is what the community thinks of Dana Beal. But my lawyer, William Kunstler, of the Chicago 7 trial fame, had filed a suit of libel against these people for saying that, in effect, Ibogaine was the Kool-Aid in Jonestown. And they were not able to prevail, and I only got a month. And I shouldn't have caused a paper cut. I'm so sorry. On the other hand, they blew up the door in my girlfriend's face. It was a tit for tat kind of thing. They're having one of these little wars. Anyway, later for that. Well, I think Jack Herrera was ultimately influenced by that, even though it was many, many years earlier. You're talking something around 1980. And he was a big skeptic of it in the 90s, was we were doing the hemp tour. He didn't want it on the tour. He didn't want to really deal with drugs issues. He didn't want to deal with harm reduction, right? He just wanted to talk about real wholesome stuff like fabric. And I know people who put a lot of money into hemp fabric and lost all their money that they made from dealing pot.
Well, there are many, many stories, and I'm happy that some of them you have told today. Very, very interesting, and making a whole picture out of many puzzles, many pieces of the puzzle. And I'm happy that you had the time to fit into your calendar. And I hope that we have even more time to talk again. And yes, I'm very, very happy that you gave us the chance, the European community, especially to look into it. And from my side, thank you because you are one of those activists who are, of course, thinking about the cannabis, the hemp. But don't forget that there is more than just hemp. And when we think about it, we realize that nearly each argument which we use for against repression and for legalization or for a possibility how to get the prohibition out of it, then we see parallels to other substances. And in the end, there are substances, and each substance must be discussed proper and fairly without any precaution about it. So we we thank you very much for keeping Ibogaine in the game, and we will hear more, and also thank you for explaining why it's in the game.
Well, the one thing I would add is, there's twice as much methamphetamine in the world as there is opiates. Ibogaine is the only cure for methamphetamine. They're shooting people in the street in Manila because they're speed freaks.
Yeah.
I still think a dose of Ibogaine is cheaper than killing somebody. I'll leave you with that thought.
It's obvious. I mean, we all agree on this, and there's no question about it. And one day, I hope we will sit together in a nice place, talk about the old stories, and remember, let's say, in a relaxed way, because then it will be solved. Hopefully.
Okay. I'll let you go.
Yes. Please
Bye-bye.
stay safe. Go on the road. Best greetings to New York. Best greetings to Chicago, and enjoy Christmas and enjoy New Year's.
As long as we don't have another 2 feet of snow. Later.
Hopefully not. So see you soon again. Bye bye.